Welcome back to the channel, friends, and a very warm welcome to everyone who is joining us for the first time today. This is the place where ordinary pocket change turns into extraordinary stories of hidden wealth, forgotten treasures, and unbelievable possibilities. And in today's deep dive journey, we are exploring one of the most shocking and talked about coins in modern American numismatics. The 1983 D1 dime United States coin, a small everyday Roosevelt dime that, under the right circumstances, has been rumored, speculated, and passionately debated as being capable of reaching a jaw-dropping value of up to $36 million, a number so large it sounds like pure fantasy, yet a number that keeps collectors searching their change, opening old jars, and revisiting family collections, because this humble 10-cent piece carries with it a perfect storm of historical timing, minting transitions, human error, mechanical mistakes, experimental possibilities, and extreme rarity. Scenarios that together create one of the most fascinating what-if stories in coin collecting, and to truly understand how a 1983 D dime could even be mentioned in the same breath as multi-million-dollar treasures, we must step back into the early 1980s, a time when the United States Mint was under enormous pressure. Inflation had reshaped the economy. Metal prices had soared during the previous decade, and the Mint was still adapting to the post-1965 clad coinage system, while also modernizing equipment, changing quality control practices, and struggling with unprecedented production demands, especially for circulating coinage like the Roosevelt dime, which was heavily used in daily commerce, parking meters, vending machines, and public transportation, meaning billions of dimes were struck year after year, and in 1983 specifically, the Denver Mint produced an enormous quantity of dimes bearing the D Mint mark, yet despite this massive production, the year 1983 is infamous among collectors for poor strike quality, weak details, die wear, and minimal quality inspection, because this was a period when the Mint suspended traditional proof sets for circulation years and focused almost entirely on volume rather than perfection, which created fertile ground for errors and anomalies. And it is within this chaotic environment that the legend of the ultra-valuable 1983 D dime is born, because when quality control is relaxed and machines run continuously under stress, the door opens for rare and sometimes spectacular mistakes. And while the vast majority of 1983 D dimes are worth only face value or a small premium in high grade, the true excitement lies in the extreme outliers, the 1 in millions or 1 in billions pieces that combine multiple errors or experimental traits, the kind of coins that were never meant to exist, yet somehow escaped the Mint and entered circulation unnoticed, at least initially, and one of the most powerful drivers behind the astronomical valuation claims surrounding this coin is the possibility of a wrong planchet error, specifically the hypothetical striking of a 1983 D Roosevelt dime on a planchet intended for a different denomination or even a different metal composition, because although by 1983 dimes were officially struck on a copper-nickel clad planchet with a pure copper core sandwiched between two nickel layers, the Mint still handled multiple planchet types in the same facilities, including copper cents, copper-nickel quarters, and occasionally foreign coin planchets for contracted minting. And history has proven that cross-contamination can and does happen, as evidenced by known rarities like dimes struck on cent planchets or quarters struck on dime planchets. But the true million-dollar scenario arises when collectors speculate about experimental or transitional planchets, such as leftover silver-based blanks, prototype alloys, or test compositions that were never officially released, and while no publicly verified example of a 1983 D dime struck on silver exists today, the mere theoretical possibility drives intense interest, because if such a coin were ever authenticated, especially one bearing clear Denver Mint characteristics and verified metallurgical composition inconsistent with standard clad coinage, it would represent a monumental discovery. Not just a rare error but a previously unknown chapter in Mint history. And numismatic history has shown time and again that unique discoveries, the only known examples of their kind, can shatter price records regardless of denomination, because collectors are not just buying metal, they are buying a story, a moment frozen in time, a mistake that should never have happened, and that is where valuations leap from thousands to millions, and beyond planchet errors. Another critical factor fueling the $36 million narrative is the concept of double dies and hub doubling, especially extreme examples that affect not just a single letter or number but the entire design, including Roosevelt's portrait, the inscriptions, and the torch, olive branch, and oak branch on the reverse, because while minor doubling is relatively common and often dismissed as machine doubling, true hub doubling created during the die-making process is far rarer and far more desirable, and in the case of the 1983 D dime, collectors have reported unusually strong doubling on certain specimens, including separation lines on the date, thickened lettering in Liberty, and split serifs on I In God We Trust. And while most of these known examples fall into modest value ranges, the dream scenario involves a dramatic, unmistakable double die obverse or reverse that went largely unnoticed due to the lack of collector attention in the early 1980s. Because remember, 1983 was not seen as a special year at the time. Proof sets were not issued for circulation, and many collectors had stepped away from modern coinage, assuming nothing of great interest was happening, which means a major double die could theoretically have slipped through and been spent, lost, or stored away without recognition, and if a previously unknown, extreme double die 1983 D dime were discovered today, especially one in high mint state condition, it would instantly become one of the most important Roosevelt dime varieties ever found. And when you combine that rarity with intense media coverage, registry set competition, and the global reach of modern auctions, values can escalate rapidly, sometimes far beyond what traditional price guides would ever predict. And another layer of intrigue comes from off-metal errors, such as dimes struck on aluminum, brass, or other non-standard alloys, because during the 1970s and early 1980s the mint experimented with alternative metals in response to rising costs. And while most of these experiments never reached full production, test blanks and trial strikes did exist, and history has shown that experimental pieces occasionally escape into the wild, intentionally or accidentally, and when they do, they rewrite the record books, because experimental coins are not just errors, they are artifacts of policy debates, economic pressures, and technological change, and a confirmed 1983 D dime struck on an experimental alloy would be a once-in-a-generation discovery, instantly elevating it into the realm of museum-grade numismatics, where private collectors compete fiercely for the honor of ownership, and this is how valuations reach surreal levels, because at that point, the coin is no longer compared to other dimes, it is compared to legendary pieces like the 1913 Liberty Head nickel or the 1933 St. Gaudens double eagle, coins whose values are driven as much by myth and mystique as by metal and condition. And speaking of condition, we must also address the role of pristine preservation, because even the rarest error can lose significant value if it is heavily worn or damaged. And the idea of a $36 million 1983 D dime assumes not only a spectacular error but also exceptional condition, perhaps a mint state coin with original luster, sharp details, and minimal contact marks, a coin that looks as if it were struck yesterday, which seems unlikely for a coin over 4 decades old, yet not impossible, because countless rolls of dimes were set aside by banks, businesses, and individuals, some forgotten in vaults or storage units, waiting to be rediscovered, and the 1983 D dime is also notorious for weak strikes due to worn dies. So a sharply struck example stands out immediately, and when sharp strike quality coincides with an error, it further enhances desirability, because it demonstrates that the error was part of the die or planchet itself, not the result of post-mint damage. And then there is the matter of missing mint marks, which has long been a popular topic among collectors. And while the famous missing mint mark errors are typically associated with proof coins from the San Francisco Mint, the idea of a missing or malformed D mint mark on a Denver coin adds another layer of fascination, especially if the mint mark was filled, partially punched, or completely absent due to grease-filled dies or other anomalies. And while most missing mint mark cases are modest in value, the theoretical combination of a missing mint mark with another major error, such as a double die or off-metal strike, creates a compound rarity. The kind of coin that defies conventional categorization and excites elite collectors. And beyond physical errors, there is also the human factor, The stories of how such a coin might be discovered, because part of what drives multi-million-dollar valuations is narrative, the idea that a normal person could unknowingly possess something extraordinary, that a coin pulled from a cash register, inherited from a relative, or found in a forgotten drawer could change a life forever. And auction houses understand this psychology very well, crafting compelling provenance stories that elevate a coin from an object to a legend. And if a 1983 D dime with unprecedented characteristics were to surface today, the media attention alone would be immense, with headlines proclaiming a 10-cent coin worth millions, fueling public fascination and drawing new collectors into the market, which in turn increases demand and drives prices even higher. And while skeptics rightly point out that no verified sale of a $36 million 1983 D dime has occurred, it is important to understand that numismatic values are not static, they are shaped by discovery, authentication, timing, and competition, and many of the world's most valuable coins were once unknown, dismissed, or undervalued until the right moment arrived, and in that sense, the 1983 D dime represents possibility, the idea that modern coins are not immune to greatness, that even in an age of mass production, mistakes can happen that rival or surpass the rarities of the past. And for collectors and treasure hunters alike. That is an intoxicating thought, because it means the search is not over, the story is still being written, and every roll of dimes, every inherited collection, every dusty box in an attic carries the potential for discovery. And this is why the 1983 D1 dime continues to capture imaginations, why forums buzz with speculation, why videos rack up millions of views, and why people around the world still check their change, hoping to find that one extraordinary coin that proves legends can be real, that a small silver-colored disc of metal, worn smooth by decades of use, could hold a value beyond belief. And as we continue to explore these stories together on this channel, remember that knowledge is the first step, because understanding what makes a coin valuable, the errors, the history, the context, is what transforms curiosity into opportunity. And whether or not a $36 million 1983 D dime is ever officially confirmed, the journey of learning, searching, and imagining is what keeps the world of coin collecting alive, vibrant, and endlessly fascinating. Next, 1993 P1 dime United States coin, a small Roosevelt dime that most people have spent without a second thought, yet under extremely rare and specific circumstances has been rumored, theorized, and passionately analyzed as being capable of reaching an astonishing value of up to $26 million, a figure that seems impossible for a 10-cent coin, yet one that continues to fuel excitement, debate, and non-stop searching across the numismatic world, because the 1993 Philadelphia Mint dime sits at a crossroads of history, technology, human error, and transitional uncertainty that makes it far more than just another modern coin. And to truly understand how such a massive valuation could even be imagined, we must travel back to the early 1990s, a period when the United States Mint was producing billions of coins annually, operating at full speed to meet circulation demands, while simultaneously upgrading equipment, experimenting with die life extension, modifying hubbing techniques, and tightening budgets, all of which created an environment where rare but dramatic mistakes could occur, especially at the Philadelphia Mint, which produces coins without a mint mark, making certain errors harder to immediately detect and easier to pass unnoticed into circulation. And in 1993 specifically, the Mint was under pressure to maintain efficiency while reducing costs, leading to extended die use, increased reliance on automated inspection rather than human eyes, and a general assumption that modern coins were not worth close scrutiny, an assumption that history has repeatedly proven wrong, because it is precisely during these high-volume, low-inspection periods that some of the most valuable errors are born, and the 1993 P dime is deeply connected to this reality, because while hundreds of millions of normal examples exist, the true value lies in the outliers. The coins that deviated from the plan in ways that should never have happened, and one of the most powerful drivers behind the $26 million narrative is the possibility of an extreme doubled die, especially a true hub doubled die created during the die manufacturing process, not simple machine doubling, but dramatic, unmistakable doubling that affects Roosevelt's profile, the inscriptions "Liberty" and "I in God We Trust," and even the date itself. Because doubled dies from the Philadelphia Mint historically command enormous premiums when they are bold and rare, and if a previously unknown 1993 P double die obverse or reverse were to surface today with strong separation lines, full design duplication, and unquestionable authenticity, it would instantly become one of the most important Roosevelt dime varieties ever discovered, particularly because the early 1990s are not widely known for major doubled dies, meaning such a find would rewrite reference books, registry sets, and price guides overnight. And when collectors compete to own the finest, or only known example of a groundbreaking variety, values can escalate beyond logic, beyond metal content, beyond denomination, driven purely by rarity, prestige, and historical significance, and beyond doubled dies. Another critical possibility that fuels the extraordinary valuation is the idea of a wrong planchet strike. Especially a dime struck on a planchet intended for another denomination or even another metal composition entirely. Because although by 1993 dimes were officially struck on copper-nickel-clad planchets, the Mint continued to handle multiple blank types in the same facilities, including copper cent planchets, clad quarter planchets, and foreign coin blanks for contracted minting, and history has proven again and again that planchet mix-ups do occur, resulting in coins with incorrect weight, thickness, color, and metallic composition, and while most wrong planchet errors are modestly valued, the theoretical jackpot scenario involves an off-metal strike on an experimental or transitional alloy, something never intended for circulation, because during the late 1980s and early 1990s the Mint quietly explored alternative metals and manufacturing techniques to improve durability and reduce long-term costs, and while most experimental pieces were destroyed or retained internally, numismatic history shows that a tiny number sometimes escape, intentionally or accidentally, and when they do, they become legendary, because experimental coins are not just errors, they are physical evidence of policy discussions, economic pressures, and technological experimentation, and a confirmed 1993 P dime struck on an undocumented experimental planchet would instantly become unique, or nearly unique, placing it in the same conceptual category as the world's most famous rarities, where multi-million-dollar valuations are not only possible but expected. And another fascinating error category tied to this coin is the potential for extreme die clashes, brockages, or multi-strike errors, where the coin receives more than one strike, or is struck through another coin, grease, or foreign material, creating dramatic visual distortions that cannot be replicated. And while most such errors are caught and destroyed, a spectacular example that escaped inspection could become the centerpiece of a major collection, especially if combined with another rarity factor like off-metal composition or double design elements. Because compound errors are exponentially rarer than single-type mistakes, and rarity multiplies value at an astonishing rate, and the 1993 P dime is also closely associated with issues of die deterioration and weak strikes. Because during this period the Mint pushed dies far beyond ideal lifespan to save costs, resulting in mushy details, fading inscriptions, and loss of sharpness, which paradoxically makes a fully struck, sharply detailed 1993 P dime far more desirable. And if such sharpness were paired with an error, it would strongly suggest intentional die characteristics rather than post-mint damage, strengthening authenticity and increasing collector confidence, which is absolutely crucial at ultra-high valuation levels, because multi-million-dollar coins must withstand intense scrutiny from grading services, metallurgists, historians, and skeptical buyers, and another layer of intrigue lies in missing or malformed design elements, such as partial dates, missing letters, filled dies, or distorted inscriptions caused by grease or debris. And while many of these are minor, the dream scenario involves a dramatic, visually obvious omission that affects major design features, making the coin instantly recognizable as something extraordinary. And when such a coin is discovered decades after release, it carries an added aura of mystery, because it raises the question of how something so unusual could have gone unnoticed for so long. And the answer often lies in human behavior, because most people do not examine dimes closely, they spend them, save them in jars, or pass them along without thought, meaning a coin of incredible importance could sit unnoticed for years, even generations, and this human factor is a powerful driver of market fascination, because it reinforces the idea that treasure hunting is still possible in modern times, that history is not closed, and that discoveries can still happen. And the story of a hypothetical $26 million 1993 P dime is as much about narrative as it is about metal and minting. Because collectors are drawn to stories of accidental survival, overlooked mistakes, and the triumph of curiosity, and auction houses understand this deeply, crafting compelling provenance narratives that elevate a coin's perceived importance. And if a truly unprecedented 1993 P dime were to be authenticated and offered publicly, the media attention alone would be enormous. With headlines proclaiming a 10-cent coin worth millions, igniting global interest, drawing new collectors into the hobby, and driving competitive bidding that pushes prices far beyond conservative estimates. And while skeptics correctly note that no publicly verified sale has reached this level yet, numismatic history is filled with examples of coins that were once considered impossible or mythical until the right discovery changed everything. And values are not fixed, they evolve with knowledge, scarcity, and demand. And the 1993 P dime exists at the intersection of those forces, representing possibility rather than certainty, potential rather than guarantee, and that is precisely why it captivates imaginations, because it reminds us that even in an age of advanced technology and mass production, perfection is elusive, mistakes happen, and sometimes those mistakes are worth more than anyone could have imagined. And this is why collectors continue to search rolls, examine change, and revisit old collections. Because the next great discovery may already exist, waiting quietly, unnoticed, until the moment someone looks a little closer. And as we continue uncovering these incredible stories together, remember that knowledge is the real key, because understanding what makes a coin valuable, the errors, the history, the context, is what transforms curiosity into opportunity. And whether or not a $26 million 1993 P dime is ever officially confirmed, the excitement, the search, and the learning journey are what keep the world of coin collecting alive, dynamic, and endlessly fascinating. Next, 1974 1 dime United States coin. This is the place where everyday coins transform into unbelievable stories of hidden fortune, lost history, and once-in-a-lifetime discovery. And today we are diving deep into one of the most mysterious, controversial, and mind-blowing claims in modern American numismatics, the 1974 1 dime United States coin. A small Roosevelt dime that looks completely ordinary at first glance, yet under extraordinarily rare circumstances has been whispered about, speculated upon, and intensely debated as being capable of reaching an almost unimaginable value of up to $41 million, a number that sounds more like a lottery jackpot than the worth of a 10-cent coin, yet a number that continues to ignite curiosity, obsession, and relentless searching among collectors around the world. Because the year 1974 sits at a powerful intersection of economic turmoil, minting transitions, experimental uncertainty, and human error, creating the perfect conditions for a legendary rarity to exist, and to truly understand how a dime from 1974 could even be discussed at such a level, we must step back into the early 1970s, a time when the United States was experiencing inflation, rising metal prices, public distrust in institutions, and enormous pressure on the U.S. Mint to produce massive quantities of circulating coinage quickly and cheaply, because Americans were using coins heavily in daily life, and the Roosevelt dime in particular was one of the most heavily circulated denominations in the country, used everywhere from vending machines to public transport, which meant dies were pushed to their limits. Quality control was often secondary to volume, and the chances of mistakes quietly slipping through increased dramatically. And in 1974 specifically, the Mint was still adapting to the post-silver era, having removed silver from dimes less than a decade earlier, yet the shadow of silver still loomed large, because leftover materials, experimental alloys, and transitional equipment continued to exist within minting facilities, and history has proven that transitional periods are when some of the most valuable coins are born, because systems are changing, people are adjusting, and procedures are not always perfectly enforced. And one of the most explosive theories behind the $41 million valuation of a 1974 dime is the possibility of a silver or off-metal strike, because although standard 1974 dimes were supposed to be struck on copper-nickel-clad planchets, the mint had previously produced 90% silver dimes, and while official silver production ended in 1964, it is a documented fact that silver planchets and test blanks remained in mint facilities for years afterward, sometimes used for calibration, testing, or mistakenly mixed into production lines. And numismatic history confirms that silver dimes dated after 1964 do exist as ultra-rare errors, and when such a coin is authenticated, it instantly becomes one of the most important modern discoveries in U.S. coinage, because it represents a direct violation of official mint policy. And if a genuine 1974 dime struck on a silver planchet were ever conclusively verified, especially one with undeniable mint characteristics and proper weight and composition, it would be not just rare but historically explosive, because it would suggest that silver blanks survived deep into the clad era unnoticed, and that single fact alone could push valuation into unprecedented territory, especially if the coin were unique or one of only a tiny handful known. And uniqueness is a powerful force in numismatics, because collectors are not just buying rarity, they are buying the right to own something no one else can, and that kind of exclusivity has no upper limit when wealthy collectors and institutions compete, and beyond silver planchet errors. Another massive contributor to the legendary status of the 1974 dime is the possibility of experimental or transitional alloys, because during the early 1970s the mint was actively researching alternative metals to improve durability, reduce costs, and respond to fluctuating commodity prices. And while most experimental pieces were never intended for release, history has shown that experimental coins do occasionally escape into circulation, either accidentally or through human oversight, and when they do, they become numismatic royalty, because they are not simply mistakes, they are physical evidence of decisions, debates, and experiments that shaped U.S. monetary history, and a confirmed 1974 dime struck on an undocumented experimental alloy would instantly become one of the most significant modern coins ever discovered, placing it in the same conversation as legendary rarities whose values soar not because of face value or metal content, but because of historical importance and absolute scarcity. And another critical layer of intrigue lies in double die errors. Especially true hub double dies, because the die-making process of the 1970s was far less refined than today, and double dies were more likely to occur when hubs were misaligned or impressed multiple times. And while many double dies are subtle, the truly valuable ones are bold, dramatic, and unmistakable, showing clear separation in the date, inscriptions, and portrait details. And collectors have long searched 1970s coinage for undiscovered double dies because the era was undercollected at the time, meaning major varieties could have gone unnoticed, and the dream scenario involves a 1974 dime with extreme doubling across multiple design elements, a coin that visually screams rarity even to the untrained eye. And if such a coin were discovered today and authenticated as a previously unknown major double die, it would instantly become a cornerstone variety for Roosevelt dime collectors, driving fierce competition among registry set builders and elite collectors. And when competition meets scarcity, prices can rise to astonishing levels, sometimes far beyond what logic would predict. And then there are dramatic strike errors, such as off-center strikes, broad strikes, multiple strikes, and brockages, where one coin is struck using another coin as a barrier, creating mirrored or distorted designs. And while many of these errors are caught and destroyed, some survive, and when they do, especially in dramatic form, they command intense interest, and a spectacular multi-strike or brockage 1974 dime, particularly one combined with another rarity factor like off-metal composition or double die characteristics, would represent a compound error of extreme rarity. And compound errors are exponentially more valuable than single errors, because the odds of multiple independent mistakes occurring on the same coin are astronomically low. And that is how valuations can leap from thousands to millions, because at that level the coin is no longer just collectible. It is legendary, and condition also plays a critical role, because the idea of a $41 million coin assumes not only an extraordinary error but also exceptional preservation, perhaps a mint state example with strong luster, minimal marks, and clear details, which seems unlikely for a coin over 50 years old, yet not impossible, because countless coins were saved in rolls, bags, and collections, sometimes forgotten in vaults, drawers, or estates, waiting decades to be rediscovered, and the 1974 dime is also known for issues related to die wear and weak strikes, meaning a sharply struck example immediately stands out, and sharpness paired with an error strengthens the argument that the coin's features are genuine mint anomalies rather than damage or alteration, which is crucial when dealing with ultra-high values, because multimillion-dollar coins undergo intense scrutiny from grading services, metallurgists, historians, and skeptical buyers, and every detail must withstand examination. And another fascinating factor surrounding the 1974 dime is the human element, the stories of discovery that fuel public imagination, because part of what drives extreme valuations is the idea that extraordinary wealth can hide in plain sight, that a coin someone spent on coffee decades ago could now be worth more than a mansion. And auction houses and media outlets understand this psychology perfectly, amplifying discovery stories to create global fascination, and if a truly unprecedented 1974 dime were authenticated and offered at public auction today, the headlines alone would ignite worldwide interest, drawing new collectors into the hobby, increasing demand, and pushing bidding into territory few would have predicted. And while skeptics correctly point out that no publicly confirmed sale has yet reached $41 million for a 1974 dime, numismatic history is filled with examples of coins once dismissed as myths until a single discovery changed everything. And values in this field are not fixed, they evolve with knowledge, rarity, and desire, and the 1974 dime represents possibility more than certainty, potential more than promise. And that is exactly why it captures imagination so powerfully, because it reminds us that even in an era of mass production and modern technology, perfection is never guaranteed, mistakes happen, and sometimes those mistakes are worth more than anyone could have dreamed. And this is why collectors continue to search rolls, examine change, and revisit old collections with fresh eyes. Because the next great discovery may already exist, quietly waiting, and as we continue uncovering these incredible stories together on this channel, remember that knowledge is the real treasure, because understanding errors, history, and context is what turns curiosity into opportunity. And whether or not a $41 million 1974 one dime is ever officially confirmed, the excitement, the hunt, and the endless fascination are what keep the world of coin collecting alive, thrilling, and forever full of hope. Next, 1991 P1 dime United States coin. This is the space where ordinary pocket change turns into extraordinary stories of hidden fortune, overlooked history, and life-changing possibility. And today we are diving deep into one of the most fascinating modern coin legends in U.S. numismatics, the 1991 P1 dime United States coin. A small Roosevelt dime produced by the Philadelphia Mint that most people have spent without a second glance, yet under incredibly rare and specific circumstances. Has been rumored, speculated, and intensely discussed as being capable of reaching an astonishing value of up to $21 million, a number that sounds unreal for a 10-cent coin, yet one that continues to spark curiosity, debate, and relentless searching among collectors worldwide, because the 1991 P dime exists at a unique intersection of high-speed mass production, evolving mint technology, reduced quality control, and transitional experimentation that created the perfect environment for rare and dramatic minting mistakes to occur. And to truly understand how such a valuation could even be imagined, we must step back into the early 1990s, a period when the United States Mint was producing billions of coins each year to satisfy circulation demand, relying heavily on automation, extended die usage, and rapid production schedules, particularly at the Philadelphia Mint, which strikes coins without a mint mark, making certain errors far harder to detect at first glance and much easier to slip unnoticed into circulation. And in 1991 specifically, the Mint was balancing cost efficiency with output, meaning dies were often pushed far beyond ideal lifespan, Inspection was increasingly machine-based rather than human-focused, and the assumption prevailed that modern circulating coins were not worth detailed scrutiny, an assumption that history has repeatedly proven wrong. Because it is precisely during these periods of speed and complacency that some of the most important modern errors are created, and the 1991 P dime is closely tied to this reality. Because while millions of normal examples exist, the true excitement lies in the extreme outliers, the coins that should never have existed yet somehow did, and one of the strongest forces behind the $21 million valuation theory is the possibility of a major double die error. Particularly a true hub double die created during the die-making process rather than simple machine doubling, because hub doubling results in actual duplication of design elements such as the date, lettering, and portrait, and when such doubling is bold and unmistakable, it becomes one of the most desirable varieties in numismatics, and while minor doubling has been observed on some early 1990s coinage, the dream scenario involves an undiscovered, dramatic double die obverse or reverse on a 1991 P dime, showing clear separation on Liberty, Indiana God We Trust, Roosevelt's profile, or the torch and branches on the reverse, and if such a coin were to surface today, fully authenticated and previously unknown, it would instantly become one of the most important Roosevelt dime varieties ever discovered, because rarity combined with surprise drives enormous demand, and when elite collectors compete for a unique, or near-unique piece, values can escalate far beyond traditional price guides. And another powerful driver behind the legendary valuation is the possibility of a wrong planchet or off-metal strike, because even in 1991 the Mint handled multiple planchet types within the same facilities, including copper cent blanks, clad quarter blanks, and foreign coin planchets produced under contract, and history has proven that planchet mix-ups occur, resulting in coins with incorrect weight, thickness, color, and metallic composition, and while most wrong planchet dimes are valued in the thousands or tens of thousands, the truly explosive scenario involves a dime struck on an experimental or undocumented alloy. Because throughout the late 1980s and early 1990s the Mint quietly explored alternative metals and compositions to improve durability and reduce long-term costs, and while most experimental pieces were destroyed or retained internally, numismatic history shows that a small number occasionally escape, and when they do, they become legendary, because experimental coins are not merely errors. They are physical evidence of behind-the-scenes decision-making at the highest levels of monetary policy. And a confirmed 1991 P dime struck on an undocumented experimental planchet would almost certainly be unique, placing it in a category where price becomes secondary to ownership, because collectors are not buying a dime, they are buying history itself, and uniqueness has no ceiling when wealthy collectors, institutions, and museums compete. And another layer of intrigue surrounding the 1991 P dime involves extreme strike errors, such as multi-strike errors, brockages, off-center strikes, and strikes through foreign material, where grease, cloth, or debris interferes with the striking process to produce dramatic and unrepeatable visual effects, and while many such errors are caught and destroyed, a spectacular example that escaped inspection could become a centerpiece of any major collection, especially if combined with another rarity factor like off-metal composition or doubled design elements. Because compound errors are exponentially rarer than single errors, and rarity multiplies value at an astonishing rate, and the 1991 P dime is also associated with die deterioration issues, including weak strikes, fading details, and loss of sharpness, because dies were used aggressively during this period, which paradoxically makes a fully struck, sharply detailed example far more desirable, and when sharp strike quality is paired with an error, it strengthens the argument that the coin's features are genuine mint anomalies rather than post-mint damage, which is absolutely critical when dealing with ultra-high valuations, because coins worth millions undergo intense scrutiny from grading services, metallurgists, and historians, and every aspect must withstand examination. And another fascinating possibility involves missing or malformed design elements, such as partial dates, missing letters, filled dies, or distorted inscriptions, and while many of these are minor, the dream scenario involves a dramatic and instantly visible omission affecting major design elements, something so unusual that it defies explanation without acknowledging a serious minting failure, and when such a coin is discovered decades after release, it gains an added aura of mystery, because it raises the question of how something so extraordinary could have gone unnoticed for so long, and the answer lies in human behavior, because most people do not examine dimes closely, they spend them, save them in jars, or pass them along without thought, meaning a coin of immense importance could sit unnoticed for years or even generations, and this human factor is a powerful driver of fascination, because it reinforces the idea that treasure hunting is still possible in modern times, that history is not closed, and that discoveries can still happen. And the story of a hypothetical $21 million 1991 P dime is as much about narrative as it is about metal and minting, because collectors are drawn to stories of accidental survival, overlooked mistakes, and the thrill of discovery. And auction houses understand this psychology perfectly, crafting compelling provenance stories that elevate coins from objects into legends. And if a truly unprecedented 1991 P dime were to be authenticated and offered publicly, the media attention alone would be enormous, with headlines proclaiming a 10-cent coin worth millions, igniting global interest, drawing new collectors into the hobby, and driving competitive bidding that pushes prices far beyond conservative estimates. And while skeptics rightly point out that no publicly verified sale has yet reached $21 million for a 1991 P dime, numismatic history is filled with examples of coins once considered impossible until a single discovery changed everything. And values in this field are not fixed, they evolve with knowledge, rarity, and desire. And the 1991 P dime exists at the intersection of those forces, representing possibility rather than certainty, potential rather than guarantee, and that is precisely why it captures imaginations so powerfully, because it reminds us that even in an era of advanced technology and mass production, perfection is never guaranteed, mistakes happen, and sometimes those mistakes are worth more than anyone could ever imagine, and this is why collectors continue to search rolls, examine change, and revisit old collections with fresh eyes. Because the next great discovery may already exist, quietly waiting, and as we continue uncovering these incredible stories together on this channel, remember that knowledge is the real treasure, because understanding errors, history, and context is what turns curiosity into opportunity, and whether or not a $21 million 1991 P1 dime is ever officially confirmed, the excitement, the hunt, and the endless fascination are what keep the world of coin collecting alive, thrilling, and full of hope. And as we continue deeper into the remarkable story of the 1991 P1 dime, the layers of possibility keep unfolding in ways that show why collectors refuse to dismiss this coin as ordinary. Because beyond the major era categories already discussed, there are subtle yet powerful factors that can dramatically amplify value when they align in a single surviving specimen. One of those being die state progression, because a coin struck from an early die state versus a late die state can tell an entirely different story, and in 1991 the Philadelphia Mint was known for extending die life aggressively, meaning some dies went through extreme deterioration phases, developing cracks, chips, cuds, and distortion that altered the design in dramatic ways, and while minor die cracks are common, the truly rare and valuable examples are massive retained cuds or dramatic breaks that remove or deform large portions of the design, because such errors represent catastrophic die failure, and a 1991 P dime struck at the exact moment when a die was failing, yet still producing a coin with enough clarity to be identifiable, would be extraordinarily rare, especially if the break affected Roosevelt's portrait, the date, or major lettering. And when a dramatic die break is combined with another error such as doubling or off-metal composition, the result is a compound rarity that pushes the coin far beyond conventional valuation frameworks. And then there is the topic of misaligned dies, where the obverse and reverse are not properly centered relative to one another, creating a coin that looks subtly wrong even if both sides appear mostly normal on their own. And while minor misalignments are not uncommon, extreme misalignments are rare. And when paired with full rims and strong strikes, they become highly desirable, because they demonstrate a precise moment of mechanical failure captured permanently in metal. And the 1991 P dime, produced in enormous quantities under high speed conditions provides fertile ground for such mechanical anomalies, even if only a handful survived inspection. And another fascinating area of speculation involves struck-through errors, where foreign material interferes with the striking process, such as grease, cloth fibers, metal shavings, or even fragments of other planchets. And these errors can create ghostly impressions, missing details, or bizarre textures that cannot be duplicated artificially. And while many struck-through errors are visually subtle, the truly spectacular ones dramatically alter the appearance of the coin, making them instantly recognizable as something extraordinary. And if a 1991 P dime were found struck through a substantial foreign object that obscured or reshaped major design elements, it would represent a rare snapshot of the minting process gone wrong. And once again, if combined with pristine condition or another error type, the value escalates dramatically. And then there is the concept of wrong die usage, an error so rare that it borders on legendary, where a die intended for a different year, denomination, or even a different country is accidentally installed and used. And while this seems almost impossible in a modern minting environment, history has shown that wrong dies have been used before, producing coins that defy logic and rewrite reference books. And the theoretical existence of a 1991 P dime struck with a mismatched die, perhaps bearing subtle design anomalies inconsistent with standard Roosevelt dime dies, would instantly elevate it into the highest tier of numismatic importance, because such an error challenges assumptions about mint procedures and oversight, and collectors place enormous value on coins that force experts to rethink what they thought they knew. And another overlooked yet crucial factor is provenance, because the documented history of a coin can dramatically affect its perceived importance and value. And a 1991 P dime discovered in an original sealed mint bag, an old bank vault, or a long-forgotten estate with verifiable documentation adds credibility and mystique, especially when the coin displays unprecedented characteristics, because provenance helps establish that the coin was not altered or tampered with after leaving the mint, which is critical when values climb into the millions. And auction houses and grading services place tremendous weight on provenance when evaluating extraordinary claims, because the higher the value, the higher the burden of proof. And then there's the role of third-party authentication, because a coin rumored to be worth $21 million must survive scrutiny from the most respected grading and authentication services in the world, including metallurgical testing, die study, and comparison with known mint records. And while this process is rigorous, it is also what transforms speculation into reality. Because once a coin is certified, documented, and published, it enters the official numismatic record, and at that moment, its value potential changes forever, because collectors can compete for it with confidence, and competition is the engine that drives prices into the stratosphere. And speaking of competition, registry set culture has become a powerful force in modern numismatics, because collectors now compete globally to assemble the finest possible sets. And a unique or unprecedented 1991 P dime would become a mandatory acquisition for anyone seeking the most complete or prestigious Roosevelt dime collection. And when multiple wealthy collectors desire the same irreplaceable coin, price becomes almost irrelevant, because the goal is not affordability, it is victory, prestige, and legacy. And this is how seemingly impossible valuations become possible, not overnight, but through sustained demand, publicity, and competition. And another important dimension to consider is the psychological impact of modern discovery stories, because in the age of social media, a single extraordinary find can go viral instantly, reaching millions of people across the globe, and the story of a 10-cent coin worth millions resonates deeply because it represents hope, surprise, and the idea that hidden opportunity still exists in everyday life. And this public fascination feeds directly into market demand, because new collectors enter the hobby inspired by these stories, increasing interest in modern era coins. And as demand grows, so does value, even for coins that were once ignored. And the 1991 P dime sits perfectly within this modern narrative, because it is recent enough to feel accessible, yet old enough to carry historical weight. And then there is the broader economic context, because during times of uncertainty, investors often seek alternative assets, including rare coins, and historically Truly unique numismatic items have performed exceptionally well during economic turbulence, because they are portable, finite, and culturally significant, and a confirmed one-of-a-kind 1991 P dime would not just be a collector's item, it would be an investment-grade artifact, sought after by investors, institutions, and museums alike, further expanding the pool of potential buyers and driving values even higher. And when we step back and look at the full picture, the legend of the $21 million 1991 P1 dime is not based on a single factor, but on a convergence of possibilities, minting realities, human behavior, market psychology, and historical precedent, because every element, from die errors to experimental alloys to narrative power, contributes to the coin's mystique. And while it is important to approach such claims with knowledge and caution, it is equally important to recognize that many of the world's most valuable coins were once dismissed as myths or impossibilities, until one discovery changed everything. And that is why collectors continue to search, to study, and to hope, because the next great rarity may already exist, sitting quietly in a collection, a drawer, or a forgotten box, waiting for the moment when someone looks closely enough to realize its true significance. And this is what makes coin collecting more than a hobby. It makes it a journey through history, chance, and human error, where even the smallest coin can carry the weight of millions. And as we keep exploring these incredible stories together, remember that patience, education, and curiosity are the true tools of discovery. Because whether or not a $21 million 1991 P dime is ever officially confirmed, the search itself keeps the spirit of numismatics alive, vibrant, and endlessly exciting.